Most people think talking to a cat is a small, almost silly habit, something you do without thinking. A comment made into the air, a sentence that expects no reply. But the truth is quieter and heavier than that. When you talk to your cat, you are not just filling silence. You are revealing how your brain learned to survive in a world that did not always listen. If you have ever found yourself explaining your day to a small animal who blinks slowly in response, you are not strange. You are not lonely in the way people assume. You are responding to a very old need, the need to be witnessed without interruption, the need to exist without being corrected, the need to speak without preparing for judgment. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being constantly misunderstood, not argued with, not attacked, just quietly unseen. It builds slowly, like water dripping onto stone. Each missed moment, each interrupted sentence, each time your feelings were minimized because someone else had it worse. Over time, your nervous system learns a lesson. Speaking is safer when nothing talks back. A cat becomes the perfect listener because it offers presence without demand. It does not ask you to simplify your feelings. It does not rush you toward a solution. It does not look at you with impatience when you pause mid-sentence, searching for the right word. When you speak to a cat, your brain relaxes into a space where performance is no longer required. Psychologically, this matters more than most people realize. The human brain is shaped by response. From early childhood, we learn whether our voice has weight, whether emotions create connection or conflict, whether being honest leads to comfort or consequences. When those early signals are inconsistent, the brain adapts. It learns to scan faces, to measure tone, to hold back the most vulnerable thoughts until safety is guaranteed. This is where many people who talk to animals come from, not from isolation but from over-adaptation. You may have grown up in a home where feelings were inconvenient, where silence was rewarded and expression caused tension, or where love was present but emotionally unavailable. Psychologists call this ambiguous loss. The person is there, but the emotional attunement is not. As a child, you cannot name this. You only feel the confusion of reaching out and not being fully met. So you adjust, you become observant, you become careful. You learn to self-regulate by talking quietly to yourself. And eventually, when an animal enters your life, something clicks. Here is a being that does not demand emotional labor from you. Here is a presence that does not need you to be smaller or brighter or easier to digest. When you talk to your cat, your brain is not pretending the cat understands language. Your brain is using the cat as a safe anchor, a place where thoughts can land without being pushed away. Neuroscience backs this up. Speaking thoughts out loud engages different neural pathways than thinking silently. It organizes emotion. It reduces cognitive load. It slows the stress response. When the listener feels safe, even if that listener is an animal, the parasympathetic nervous system activates. Your body shifts from alert to regulated. This is why you might notice you speak more gently to your cat than to most people. Your tone softens, your breathing slows, your words become honest in a way you rarely allow elsewhere. This is not accidental. This is your nervous system recognizing safety. Cats, in particular, play a unique role. Unlike dogs, they do not perform attention. They do not constantly seek approval. They sit beside you rather than facing you. They leave and return on their own terms. To a brain shaped by emotional unpredictability, this feels familiar but not threatening. There is no pressure to maintain engagement, no fear of disappointing them. The relationship exists without negotiation. For someone who learned early that connection requires effort, this is deeply regulating. Talking to a cat is often a sign of high internal processing. You think deeply. You replay conversations, you analyze emotional undercurrents, you notice subtleties others miss. Your brain is active, reflective, and often overstimulated. Speaking out loud becomes a release valve. It is also a form of self-validation. Many people who talk to their cats are not seeking answers. They are seeking permission. Permission to say the thing that felt too much. permission to admit confusion, permission to feel hurt without having to justify it. The cat becomes a mirror that does not distort the reflection. There is another layer to this that often goes unnoticed. If you talk to your cat during moments of stress, decision-making, or sadness, it suggests your brain learned early to self-soothe rather than rely on others. This is not weakness. It is competence born from necessity. You became your own emotional container because no one else reliably held it for you. But self-soothing has a shadow side. When you get used to processing alone, vulnerability with others can feel intrusive. Even when you crave connection, your body may tense when someone asks, "Are you okay?" Because okay has always been something you handled privately, slowly, carefully, without witnesses. So you talk to the cat instead, not because you do not want people, but because the cat does not require you to translate your inner world into something acceptable. This habit often begins in childhood. A child talks to toys, to imaginary friends, to pets. When adults listen, the habit fades. When adults dismiss or ridicule it, the habit goes under grow ND. It becomes quieter, more hidden. But it never disappears. It simply finds a new form. In adulthood, the cat becomes the keeper of unfiltered thoughts, the witness to frustration you do not want to burden others with, the silent partner to joy you learned not to express too loudly. There is intelligence in this adaptation. Your brain found a way to stay integrated, to prevent emotional bottling, to keep language connected to feeling. The danger is not in talking to your cat. The danger is in believing this is the only place your voice is safe, because the same brain that learned to speak where it would not be interrupted can also learn to be heard again. But that requires something unfamiliar, letting another human sit with your words without fixing them. And that is where things start to get uncomfortable, because if you are honest, there is a part of you that prefers the cat's silence, a part that fears that if you speak this freely to people, something will be lost. Control L. Safety, dignity, or worse, connection. So the question is not what does it mean that you talk to your cat? The question is what taught you that this was the safest place to speak, and what might happen if you discovered that safety does not have to be silent, not all at once, not recklessly, but slowly, with intention, because the habit you think is small is actually pointing toward a much deeper story about how you learn to survive emotionally. And the next part of that story is where survival begins to turn into healing, right at the moment when the brain realizes that what once kept you safe might now be quietly keeping you alone. Right at the moment when the brain realizes that what once kept you safe might now be quietly keeping you alone. This is where the habit begins to show its cost. When your deepest thoughts only ever land in silence, they never get tested by reality. They never get softened by another perspective. They never get held by hands that can tremble with yours. Over time, the mind becomes a closed room, clean, orderly, and painfully echoing. You may notice this in subtle ways. You hesitate before sharing good news, because joy once invited envy or dismissal. You minimize your pain because you learned early that it made others uncomfortable. You rehearse conversations in your head long before they happen, trying to predict every outcome, trying to stay safe. And when the day finally ends, when the noise recedes, you turn to the one presence that has never asked you to be less, the cat. The consequence is not that you talk to an animal. The consequence is that your emotional world becomes increasingly private, protected, untouched, and untouched things do not heal, they only wait. Psychologists sometimes describe this as emotional self-containment. It is a skill, it is also a burden. You become very good at carrying your own weight, so good that others never realize you are tired. This can affect relationships in ways that are hard to name. People may describe you as independent, calm, low maintenance. They may admire your composure, but they may never truly know you. Not because they do not want to, but because your nervous system has learned that closeness requires vigilance. It is easier to speak to a being who will not misunderstand you than to risk being known imperfectly. There is also grief here. Grief for the conversations you never had, the comfort you learned not to expect, the version of you that might have been louder if someone had stayed long enough to listen. Talking to your cat becomes a ritual of continuity, a way to keep language alive inside you, a way to remind yourself that your inner world exists, even if it remains mostly unseen. But here is the reframe that changes everything. This habit is not a flaw. It is evidence. Evidence that your brain values connection. Evidence that you never shut down emotionally. You rerouted. You found a way to keep expressing when expression felt risky. That takes intelligence. That takes resilience. The same capacity that allows you to speak openly to your cat can be extended, carefully, selectively, to others. Healing does not mean forcing yourself to suddenly share everything. It does not mean oversharing. It does not mean trusting blindly. Healing begins with letting your voice be heard in places where the risk is small and the safety is real. Start by noticing what you say to your cat. Those sentences matter. The way you narrate your day, the way you admit disappointment, the way you celebrate tiny wins. These are not meaningless monologues. They are rehearsals for being human with others. You can practice transferring this energy outward, one sentence at a time. You do not need a dramatic confession. You can start with something simple. I had a long day. That comment stuck with me. I am not sure how I feel yet. Pay attention to how your body responds. Notice the tension, the urge to retreat. This is not danger. Fifth is unfamiliarity. Your nervous system is learning a new pattern. Another step is allowing silence to exist between you and another person without filling it. Cats are good at this. They sit with quiet without urgency. Humans can learn this too. The right ones will not rush you. They will let your words arrive at their own pace. It also helps to remember that being misunderstood is not a failure. It is a normal part of connection. No one sees you perfectly, not even the cat. The difference is that humans can adjust, clarify, repair, and repair is where safety actually grows. You may also find value in continuing to talk to your cat. There is no need to abandon what worked. The goal is not replacement, it is expansion. Let the cat remain a sanctuary, but do not let it become the only one. There is something powerful that happens when the brain realizes it can survive being heard. That vulnerability does not always lead to harm. That some people will stay, even when the words are messy. Slowly, the invisible wall softens. The empty well begins to refill. You may notice that your voice changes. It grows steadier, less apologetic. You take up a little more space. Not because you are demanding attention, but because you are no longer afraid of it. This is what healing often looks like. Not a dramatic transformation, just a quiet redistribution of where your truth is allowed to live. One day you may catch yourself halfway through a sentence to your cat and realize you want to share this with someone else too. That moment matters. That is your brain updating its map of safety. Follow that impulse gently, because the part of you that learned to speak in silence was never broken. It was waiting for proof that connection can be calm, that being seen does not always come with a cost, that your voice does not have to echo alone forever. And if this story resonated with you, if you recognized yourself somewhere between the quiet sentences and the soft presence beside you, know this. You are not strange. You are not behind. You adapted beautifully. And healing does not mean becoming someone else. It means letting more of you be heard. If this reflection stayed with you, you might want to stay too. Subscribe, and we will keep exploring these quiet truths together.